In 2007, 1 out of every 6 Americans identified with no religion. Today that number is nearly 1 in 3. That's not a gradual shift. That's a seismic transformation happening in less than 2 decades, right under our noses. While we were busy debating which religions were winning or losing, something unexpected was happening. The fastest-growing religious group in America wasn't a religion at all. It's a category that researchers simply call the knowns. And here's what will surprise you. Most of them still believe in God, so what's really happening? And what does it mean for the future of faith in America? There's a quiet revolution taking place across America. Not in the streets. Not in politics, although it's affecting politics profoundly. It's happening in living rooms, in personal conversations, in the private decisions people. Welcome to Soulway, where we explore the stories reshaping our world. I'm here today to walk you through one of the most significant cultural shifts of our generation, a transformation that's redefining American identity, reshaping communities, and challenging everything we thought we knew about religion in the United States. Let's start with the data because the numbers themselves are remarkable. In 2007, approximately 16% of Americans identified as religiously unaffiliated. These are people who, when asked about their religion on surveys, answer atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. Fast forward to 2024, that number has nearly doubled to around 28 to 30%, depending on which major study you consult. Think about that for a moment. In just 17 years, less than a generation, the proportion of Americans with no religious affiliation has grown by roughly 80%. To put this in perspective, there are now more religiously unaffiliated Americans than there are Catholics. More than evangelicals. In fact, the knowns have become the single largest religious category in the country. And here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't happening because babies are being born into non-religious households, although that's part of it. The primary driver is religious switching people who were raised in a faith tradition and then chose to leave. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans has made this switch, moving from a religious identity they held as a child to no religious affiliation as an adult. And very few are making the journey in reverse. Only about 3% of people raised without religion join one later in life. This is a one-way street. The only major religious category in America that's experiencing sustained growth is the category of people who identify with no religion at all. So the question isn't whether this trend is real. The question is why? Before we dive into the reasons behind this shift, we need to understand who these people actually are. Because none is a label that tells us what someone isn't, but it doesn't tell us what they are. First, let's dispel a common misconception. The knowns are not all atheists. In fact, only about 17% of religiously unaffiliated Americans identify as atheists. Another 20% say they're agnostic. The remaining 63%, the vast majority, describe themselves as nothing in particular. And here, the surprising part, most of them still believe in God or some kind of higher power. Studies consistently show that around 70 to 72% of the knowns believe in God, a higher power, or a spiritual force. Many believe in heaven. Many pray, at least occasionally. Some even describe themselves as spiritual. So what they're rejecting isn't necessarily belief itself. What they're rejecting is organized religion, the institutions, the labels, the formal affiliations. When you look at the demographics, a pattern emerges. The knowns tend to be younger, though the trend is. Among Americans under 30, nearly 40% are religiously unaffiliated. That's almost 4 times higher than among seniors. They're also more likely to be politically independent or democratic-leaning. They're more likely to identify as LGBTQ, and they're more likely to be white, though the trend is growing among Hispanic Americans as well. But perhaps most importantly, they're not seekers. When asked if they're looking for a religion that would be right for them, only 9% of the unaffiliated say yes. The other 91%? They're content where they are. This isn't a temporary way station. For most, it's a destination. Now we come to the heart of the matter. Why are so many Americans leaving religion? The answer is more complex and more revealing than you might think. When researchers ask people who've left their childhood faith why they made that decision, the most common response is straightforward. They stopped believing in the religion's teachings. About 2/3 cite this as an important reason, but that's just the beginning of the story. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, LGBTQ issues. In 2016, about 29% of people who left their religion cited negative teachings about or treatment of LGBTQ people as an important factor in their decision. By 2023, that number had jumped to 47%. Think about what that means. In just 7 years, the percentage of people leaving religion over LGBTQ issues nearly doubled. And among younger adults, those under 30 who've left their faith, 60% cite this as a reason. This isn't a minor factor. It's become one of the primary drivers of religious disaffiliation, particularly among younger generations who've grown up in a world where acceptance of LGBTQ people has become a core value. Then there's the clergy sexual abuse crisis. About 31% of formerly religious Americans cite scandals involving religious leaders as an important reason for leaving. Among former Catholics specifically, that number jumps to 45%. These aren't abstract theological disagreements. These are deeply personal, often painful decisions rooted in moral disappointment, a sense that the institutions claiming moral authority have betrayed that trust. But there's another set of reasons that's perhaps even more telling. Many people who left simply say religion wasn't important in their lives. They gradually drifted away. They found they could be moral without religion. They didn't need it to be spiritual. This speaks to something fundamental. For many Americans, religion has simply become optional. In previous generations, there was social pressure to affiliate with a religion, even if you weren't particularly devout. That pressure has evaporated. It's now socially acceptable, even common, to say, "I'm not religious." And once that stigma disappeared, millions of Americans who were only nominally religious to begin with found themselves asking, why maintain the label? What do you think? Have you witnessed this shift in your own community or family? Share your thoughts in the comments. There is another dimension to this story that we need to examine: the collapse of trust in religious institutions. When Americans without religious affiliation are asked about their confidence in organized religion, the numbers are stark. About 88% have little or no trust in religious or spiritual leaders. 75% have hardly any confidence in organized religion in general. And here's the thing, this isn't just about the knowns. Only 10% of all Americans, including those who are religious, now have a great deal of confidence in organized religion. That number has been cut in half since 2016. We're witnessing a broader institutional crisis. Americans are losing faith not just in religious organizations, but in institutions across the board: government, media, corporations. Religion is part of that larger pattern. But religion faces a unique challenge. Unlike a failing business that can simply close its doors, religious communities are supposed to be sources of moral guidance, spiritual nourishment, and social connection. When people feel those institutions have failed them, whether through scandal, hypocrisy, or simply irrelevance, the disappointment cuts deeper. Many formerly religious Americans report that they don't just disagree with religious teachings. They actively dislike organized religion. They don't like religious organizations' stances on social and political issues. They're troubled by reports of abuse and misconduct by religious leaders. This isn't indifference. In many cases, it's active rejection. And once someone reaches that point, once they've decided that organized religion has nothing to offer them, or worse, that it's actively harmful, the path back becomes extraordinarily difficult. The data bears this out. The retention rate among the religiously unaffiliated is now 76%, meaning 3/4 of people who've left religion are staying away. Remember how I said most of the knowns still believe in God or a higher power? That wasn't a minor detail. It's actually the key to understanding what's really happening. Americans aren't abandoning spirituality. They're abandoning religious institutions. About 43% of religiously unaffiliated Americans describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. They believe in souls and spirits. They think there's something beyond the natural world that science can't explain. Many believe in heaven, prayer, even angels. What they've rejected isn't the transcendent. What they've rejected is the institutional middleman. In previous eras, if you wanted to connect with the divine, you needed a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a community of believers, and a tradition to guide you. Today, many Americans believe they can have that connection directly, without institutional mediation. This represents a fundamental shift in how Americans think about spirituality. It's highly individualized. It's personalized. It's DIY spirituality. Pick what resonates with you, leave what doesn't. Some would call this shallow. Others would call it authentic, freeing people from traditions that never quite fit them in the first place. But here's the uncomfortable question it raises. If you can be spiritual without religion, moral without attending services, connected to something greater without joining a community, What exactly is religion for? That's the question millions of Americans have answered with their feet by walking away. Part 6. What this means for America's future. 1030 to 1130. So where does this leave us? What does an America with 30, 40, maybe eventually 50% religiously unaffiliated citizens look like? The truth is, we're still finding out. This is an experiment in real time. Some see it as a crisis, the unraveling of moral fabric, the loss of shared values, the fragmentation of communities that once held society together. Others see it as liberation, freedom from outdated dogmas, the democratization of spirituality, the end of religious authority over personal choices. What we know is this: religious affiliation has historically been tied to community engagement, charitable giving, and social connection. As religious participation declines, some of those functions are being lost or need to be filled by other institutions. We also know that younger generations are growing up in a fundamentally different religious landscape than when being religious is, or it could lead to new forms of community and meaning-making that we haven't yet imagined. The one thing we can say with certainty is that America in 2025 is a very different country, religiously speaking, than America in 2007, and the America of 2035 will be different still. The rise of the religiously unaffiliated is one of the most significant social transformations in modern American history. It's reshaping politics, culture, and the very fabric of how communities are formed and sustained. Whether you see this as progress or decline, liberation or loss, one thing is clear: we're living through a moment of profound change. And understanding that change, really grappling with what it means and where it's headed. So here's my question for you: what do you think is driving this trend? Is it primarily about institutional failures, or is it something deeper, a fundamental shift in how people relate to questions of meaning and transcendence? And for those of you who've made this journey yourselves, either toward or away from religious affiliation, what was the turning point for you? I'd genuinely love to hear your perspectives in the comments. These conversations matter, and your voice is part of the story. If this video gave you a new way of thinking about one of the most important trends shaping our society, share it with someone who might find it thought-provoking. And if you want more deep explorations of the forces reshaping our world, that's exactly what we do here at Soulway. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious and stay thoughtful.